My name is Newsome. I graduated from the University of Florida in December. Thank you. My degree was in astrophysics, and I was a 3-year Vote Everywhere ambassador, working constantly in STEM spaces, trying to register and engage voters. And I learned firsthand just how difficult that can be. So that really inspired my Puffin Democracy Fellow project. So I want to show you partly why. This is national data from the Install report. You see the general election data on the left and midterm on the right. It may be a little bit hard to read, but STEM is second from the bottom on the right and at the bottom on the left. They are always the lowest voter turnout rate. I actually did some averages, and it's about an average of 4% lower than the average for everyone else, for their college peers. That honestly seems not too big of a deal, but again, you can see how jarring the numbers are when you see just how poorly they do turn out. At the University of Florida campus, that problem is definitely still present, which is where I'm still hosted. For the record, I do still work at the University of Florida. I'm a researcher there. So that is why I'm still in these spaces. I still see firsthand what that means. I found it very interesting as I was going around telling some people about my interest in this project. Most of my friends in the physics and astronomy community acted like this was such a no-brainer. But yet they all had different reasons for why it was happening. So one friend would say, oh, well, the reason's clear, we just don't have any time in our day. Another one would say, oh, well, this is so obvious, it's just we don't care, why do we even need to? We'll fix the world on our own. Hysterical stuff. So I'm looking to try and narrow that down a little bit. Everyone thinks it's so obvious, and yet they all disagree on what the problem is, let alone how to solve it. I think we touched on that a lot today, actually. So I'm trying to figure out, how can we handle this? The dilemma goes further to this. What happens when you don't have STEM students and community members engage in their community? It causes all these headlines. I really want you all to take a second and look at all of this. Some of these have already changed, some of them I tried to grab headlines from the previous our previous president as well. I want to make sure that this is an ever-present problem. We've had a scientific literacy issue in the United States for a while now, where I think it's getting more apparent as climate change becomes more threatening. Again, I am from the state of Florida, which is really threatened by it particularly, and that's one of the most targeted things. Our governor banned the terms climate change from the state legislator being said whatsoever. You can't even say the word once you walk in. All of these things going on. I tried to incorporate a gamut of things too. It's not just climate change, it's computer science, it's disabilities, it's Aboriginal issues. It touches everything. So people who are involved in these STEM classrooms are sitting there all day thinking, I'm just tinkering with AutoCAD on my computer and that's all it is, and they don't see how their work has real life implementations and policies that affect actual people. The dilemma continues into the public as well. So we have STEM students becoming professionals, not voting, and then we have the public not understanding science as a response. So then they vote for policies that aren't evidence-based. We have politicians who create policies that aren't evidence-based. We see this disconnect between how they view things and how scientists view things. And yet, interestingly enough, we see that scientists are ranked one of the highest levels of trust from Americans. I like that they called that highest at 21% being a great deal. A fair amount was just 55% of people thinking, oh, I trust scientists a fair amount. Like, oh yeah, the great science agenda is out to get you. So, but you can see just how bad it is. Americans don't really trust anyone, it seems. I guess that's kind of a safe assumption to an extent, but I'm looking to really undo this a little bit. We're trying to make the two sides talk to each other. Scientists are afraid of people, and people are afraid of scientists and science. So I want to really try and touch on that. So how I'm handling that is I'm looking at the reaction that we've had so far. We're already seeing that first headline is huge. 2018 is the year of scientists running for Congress. In all states, there's someone running for some level of government that is a scientist who's never been involved in government before. That may or may not be a good thing. I don't want to harp on that like that's what needs to happen immediately. I don't want to act like the answer is just anyone who's never had any political background should jump into politics, but it shows that the interest is there, and that's overall a good thing. So we need to tap into that interest being there. I obviously included the March for Science picture because that's one of the biggest things that happened in March of last year, or April of both years, sorry. April last year and this year. This year had a much lower turnout for the march already. So there was this post-election fervor that made everyone go and march with one another, and then this year it's like everyone forgot. And this is just the year with an actual election happening. So I'm trying to really tap into that momentum that's there and make sure it's being used right. I included the other two headlines, again, just to show more ways that people are fighting back to make sure science is accounted for one way or another. I loved that because I made this PowerPoint a few weeks ago, and I actually tried to update it to include that headline about Scott Pruitt, and sure enough, a few days later, look what happened. So it goes to show what happens when you do target people, or rather address people who are in the one space in government where you're supposed to address science and you're not doing that. That's what we're trying to make happen. So STEMocracy's role, by the way, that's the name of my project, STEMocracy. We have Maide Martinez to thank for that. I said to her, I really want my name to have STEM and democracy in it. And she's like, STEMocracy. So that's the name of it. We have, I really mentioned that I really want to identify barriers. I've been doing a ton of research into that. I am a researcher by nature, so that's something I really care about is what's already out there, what data can we find to justify this by what's happening. That way I can know what to tackle. I say this because as a Vote Everywhere ambassador, we kind of assumed for a while, Jenna's here from University of Florida, we talked a while about a program we could do called Policy of Something, and have policy of science spaces. And we quickly realized that that just wouldn't be effective because having a Tuesday 6 p.m. Event for STEM majors is not gonna, no one's gonna come out. They have homework to do, they have a test the next day. There is an issue with the time opportunity constraints in place for them. The research does reflect that problem as well. So I'm doing a ton of research. One of the most interesting ones was someone named Dr. Dimitri Morgan. I saw him at the conference in Anaheim with the Andrew Goodman Foundation a few weeks ago. He goes to works at Loyola University. But he also went to the University of Florida as an undergrad. I didn't know that, so that was a really cool networking opportunity because he got to show me all his data because he specifically works in civic engagement, and he for a while was just interested in why students weren't more engaged, and then noticed like his lowest numbers were always from engineering students. So he has a whole study on why that is so. Those first three things, the time and opportunity constraints, negotiating public versus private benefits, and safe spaces were how he grouped their responses. Time and opportunity is kind of obvious. I just don't have enough time, I have homework. Negotiating public versus private benefits is where you got some people responding with things like, I'm already making an impact in my field, engineering is the future, Elon Musk is gonna save the world, why should I vote? And then you have safe spaces, which is a lot of STEM students have been outcast their entire lives. They're the ones who've been bullied, they're the ones who've been picked on for their interests. They feel safe when they're alone with others and when they don't have to worry about the civic engagement spaces where they feel constantly pressured to speak up, to speak out, to be so involved. So it's really trying, having that 6 p.m. Tuesday meeting about why STEM engagement is so important, that's not gonna help them. They don't wanna be there. Even if you offer food, they'd much rather be at home where they're comfortable. You have to meet them where they are. I included the quotes as well because that goes to show how they're really thinking. This is just for engineering, by the way. This doesn't touch on the S, T, and M part, which all have their own reasons as well, but they still fall into similar categories, the research shows. I like that. I don't study engineering to learn about politics. An administrator actually said that last one, to perform in STEM, you don't need the distraction of going out and being active in communities. The distraction, that's how it was framed. Then we have the other side of things, the public's barriers to defending science-based policy. I didn't include scientific illiteracy because I think that's a disservice to the public. That's acting as if they just don't know any better. There is an issue on the education side of things that I would like to touch on, but I don't want to act like it's the public's fault. There is this fear of elitocracy, I think, which is where I want to go back on. The answer isn't necessarily scientists running for Congress immediately. That doesn't really, even if the trust level is high, I don't think that's necessarily the solution. I don't think most people are thinking, what needs to be changed here is a bunch of scientists just need to run everything. Because I think most people still feel like, oh, he thinks he's so better than me, he thinks he knows more than me just because of his degree, but it's in one specialized field, not in running the government, so what does he really know? So it's making sure that we balance that out a little bit. We make sure that we see where everyone's coming from. I also really like this notion of keeping public and public policy. So getting more scientists involved, many STEM majors can kind of have, how do you put it, a superiority complex to themselves. I think a lot of it does come from that kind of feeling outcast notion, where then when they go in their spaces and they learn so much cool, interesting things about science, technology, engineering, and math, and then they go back out into the world and no one knows about it, they kind of think that they're better than others for it. I don't mean that as a total generalization, it's not completely true, it's just something we do see very often. And I think that then produces this reverse effect where if you do have scientists in public policy spaces, they don't actually listen to the public when doing it. So I really want to focus on that top part, on making sure that I help STEM students get past their barriers and that they also help the public get over their barriers in doing so. So how we're going to do that is by applying some remedies. I have a few ideas that are all on different playing fields. There's the basic stuff of just implementing the programs like we mentioned, but doing so in a way that they can actually attend. But I really like this notion of going a little bit further into institutionalization. I want to talk with some professors about not having assignments due on election day, about just bringing up anything policy-based in the classroom, even if it's not a specific current event going on, something that happened in the past. Biology classrooms can bring up something in medical issues that's going on in the real world and how it affects policies. I actually heard a great story about a biomedical class dealing with, they were talking about a great solution to an STI, and yet it wasn't offered in some countries, and that, usually in the classroom you just talk about what the solution is, how much it costs, how you do it, and yet this one professor decided to mention, by the way, most people don't have access to this. And that made the classroom think, and it got into discussion, and they ended up, per the students' request, doing a semester-long project on it, on how to get that access better. So just bringing it up in the classroom can create and invigorate civic engagement. So that's all I want to do. I think we see the issue of lower turnout among professors too, and among faculty. We see the issue of lack of interest. Like I showed that quote before, oh, you don't need the distraction of going out. The professors don't want to be civically engaged either. They want their students focused on STEM, and we need to show them why it matters to both of them, that you still are going to be civically engaged and you have to be even in your field. So these are some ideas I have for that. I kind of want to work from a bottom-up and top-down approach. By that I mean professors to students and students to professors. There's the more fun examples too. I have some ideas such as just having science demos at voter registration events, as well as bringing voter registration to science events. At the University of Florida, we have a big event with thousands of people that come every year called Starry Night, and it's just a big astronomy fest. Why not have a voter registration table there? How have I been a Vote Everywhere ambassador for 3 years and not thought of that? It's making us realize that these things can tie together and that's okay. We need to make them affect one another's spaces. So making things fun, but also talking to professors about what they can do to actually address the students' needs more directly in a way that they realize why this matters to them is what I'm really trying to target here. All the other ideas are there as well. There is a timeline to this. So there's a midterm election coming up. My bigger concern is just making sure that I get as many people to turn out as possible. But after that, I'd really like to take a research approach and see what actually worked. What did I do that helped the most? What did I do that no one found efficient? Were those 6 p.m. Tuesday night programs actually pretty well turned out, but that whole having no assignment due on election day, that didn't really affect anyone? Or was it the other way around? What am I doing that's actually helping? What is my team doing that's actually helping? I'm gonna do that by means of a survey, as well as afterwards a focus group. So the survey, I want as many people taking as possible. Focus group, whoever is willing to volunteer to talk more about their experiences, why they aren't as civically engaged as they'd like to be, or why they don't even want to be, and really get in touch with that feeling. It's hard for me to relate to because sure, I'm a STEM major, but I've always felt really close to civic engagement. And even with these people in my circles right around me, I just sometimes don't see how they can't see why this affects them. And I really don't want to be like that. I want to understand where they're coming from more so than I already the research shows. We can look at data points all day, but I really want to get in touch with the hearts of my community members and what's going on there that's preventing them from being where they want to be. So I really like that, that notion. STEM students are the public too. So when we keep the public in public policy, STEM students are part of that public. They're the ones who typically feel outcasts though, and that their voices also aren't being listened to, that no one wants to hear them out. So that's what I'm trying to do is make sure that they realize that they are being listened to. So this research-based approach will help guide us into 2019 and 2020. That's really where y'all come in. This is a project that isn't alone to the University of Florida. Anyone is not only able, but more than welcome to help in any way, shape, and form that you would like to. So whether you'd like to just have an occasional event with a science club with voter registration present, or if you want to go the whole mile and do this every single idea I have and then do research afterwards, we can talk about that and implementing that as well. You're really welcome to help out with that. I really welcome it. I really see this as something that can be really easily implemented back on your campuses, because it's up to you how much you want to do with it. I'd love to have some data about here's how much some students turned out more or less based on what we did, but ultimately, data's cool and all, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that we're engaging anyone more. We're making them think about things they weren't thinking about before. We're making them have those kind of difficult, uncomfortable conversations that they wouldn't otherwise be having because of the work we're doing. I think that's uniquely important, and I think that there's really a place that we could all really be tackling here that no one else is doing, so I welcome that. Any questions? Thank you.